And we just do Rock Talk once in 2 months. And the last was, I already forgot about what was that, but we did cover a lot of stories. And personally, I've been in the United States for 7 years. And originally I'm from Russia, but I have German, Polish, Jewish blood. And I was exiled from my country, from Russia, for being queer professor and deputy dean. Not in the capitals, in one of the industrial regions of Russia. And if you know, in Russia in 2013, it was the law introduced propaganda of non-traditional values, and all people who were publicly LGBTIQ+, they were condemned either to be fired from their jobs or exiled, or in the worst case scenario, beaten up. So my story was with the Federal Security Services and KGB, and I was interviewed, and they tried to recruit me to report on my students and faculty who were not desirable. And KGB, or Federal Security Service, have been following me for more than 7 years, since my PhD in 2009, because I had my PhD, I was very young, and I was researching on queer and gender, and was prohibited in Russia. And besides the physical abuse and violence which I've encountered, and it's still like my scars on the chin, I've been suppressed during the propaganda law. That's why I had to leave, and that's why I try to call myself the queer in exile, the person in exile, because I still do not have the country. I don't have a citizenship yet. Coming to the United States is a challenge, as I guess a lot of immigrants before us and after us will tell the same narration, that tell the same story. So you come to the country, you have no idea what you're going to do, because your life is over, and professional life as well. And even being someone there, it's not applied to the United States, especially if you come as asylum seeker or a refugee, because they have no programming to reestablish you. They have no programming to put you back to your track. So, and I settled down in New York, and for the first 2 years, I was carrying postcards of the book. I was working to pay them rent, being highly qualified. And the next problem was nobody wanted you as a higher qualified worker, because if you have PhD, forget about getting a job as a receptionist in New York or whatever, right? So it's a struggle, and the struggle is real. And sometimes we have no idea what country of immigrants means. And for me personally, chasing the dream was to come to the United States, not because I wanted to, but because I was forced to do so. And it was the best decision in my life. But also living in the States, you see other problems, and see problems with other communities, because sometimes you can escape your country, but you cannot escape the mentality of your country. So that's what we dealing with within my organization, RUSA LGBT, Russian Speaking American LGBTIQ Association. So the people have struggled and struggled. So, but also besides the negative components of our immigration journey, we have the positive, because the United States always been a country of immigrants, and immigrants basically build up the country. So that's why we wanted to share some stories about what America does mean for people who come from different parts of the world, how we chase the dream, and how we envision that dream. So I guess the best dream for me, and to retire peacefully and to live somewhere in the woods, far away from the people, because that's, you know, when you want to just get that rest. But I'm going to turn it to Kendra, who's going to introduce the whole panel, and after that we just can step by step go to the stories.
Amazing, thank you. So as Losha said, my name is Kendra. I'm the graduate assistant for both the Women's and the Pride Center here at Slippery Rock. First off, I want to thank again everyone for coming today and joining us in our Rock Talk, Chasing the Dream, What Does America Mean to Immigrants? So again, just to give a quick rundown, I'm going to introduce all the panelists, and then each of you have about 10 minutes. If you go over, under, not a problem at all. We have some time. Speak about your experiences with answering that question proposed, and then there will be a Q&A at the end if anyone has any questions. If not, great. But I just want to make sure everyone knows, feel free to utilize the chat. If you have questions and don't want to forget them later, go ahead and put it in the chat. Not a problem. We will get to them. So thank you. Okay, so I'm going to introduce the panelists. So first up, We have Dr. Andre Braz, comes from a lovely middle-class family in the southern end of Portugal that loves teasing and laughing with each other and used to spend his summers at the beach. I'm jealous, that's beautiful. In 2000, he moved to the capital city, Lisbon, to teach technological chemistry, and it was when he first realized he wanted to explore and see more of the world. In 2006, he moved to the vibrant city of Amsterdam in Holland, where he completed a master's in forensic science while working as a part-time gym instructor. After that, he moved to the historical city of Alcalá del Henares. Feel free to correct me.
Yeah, Alcalá de Henares.
Amazing, thank you. And that is in Spain near Madrid, where he completed his PhD in criminalistics and became fluent in his third language. Not long after, he moved to sunny Recife, northeast of Brazil, for his postdoc research, and that was when he met his husband, Judson. Is that it? Okay, great. In 2019, he moved to the US for his assistant professor position at SRU in the chemistry department. And he currently lives in Butler, loves doing CrossFit, and is looking forward to the end of the pandemic to start traveling around the US. Me also, love that. Thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Fedwa Ludi. Do you want to correct me? Ludi?
Yeah,
Amazing.
yeah, you got it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Who is an assistant professor in the Department of Strategic Communication and Media. She is a co-director of the Middle East Studies Center and the advisor of the UNICEF Club. Her areas of expertise include intercultural international communication, civil discourse, communication ethics, and philosophy of communication. She is the author of The Transitional Justice and Human Rights in Morocco, Negotiating the Years of Lead. So thank you also for joining us. And then next up, but not last but not least, I feel like I need to say that, Dr. Rochelle Dijkstra Cruikshanks. Awesome. Who is a assistant professor of sociology here at SRU in the Department of Nonprofit Management, Empowerment, and Diversity Studies, is the vice president of the North Central Sociology Association. As a sociologist, her general approach is to analyze the relationships between the structure of our society, our culture, and individual experiences, which means seeing the complex patterns of society and understanding how individual level phenomena, such as thoughts, behavior, and feelings, are related to how groups and wider society are structured and serve as powerful forces influencing our experiences. A major focus of sociology is understanding the experiences of marginalized minority groups, which has led to her focus on inequality in both her academic work and community-based initiatives, including advocating for greater tolerance, inclusion, and value of diversity in her community and on this campus. Her research is focused on everything from childhood emotional socialization, infidelity and intimate relationships, domestic violence, nurse burnout, work-family dynamics, graffiti, and most recently, the experience of postpartum depression. As an immigrant herself, but one that can pass in America, she will be bringing her academic understandings of the immigrant experience along with her own anecdotal remarks to this conversation. So thank you all again for joining us today. And whoever wants to start, please go right ahead.
Ladies first.
Sure, I'm happy to go. No problem. So it's kind of interesting because until, first of all, I've been in America since 1999, so that's technically like 22 years. But it was until maybe about 3 years ago that I really thought of this idea of immigrants, because all of this time I never thought of myself as an immigrant, which is weird, right? But that's the truth. I just never thought of I was actually invited to speak at a conference on immigrants and refugees, and it just dawned on me, oh, I'm an immigrant too. And it's like for the first time I had to think about what it means to be an immigrant, because for me, I think prior to that moment it was, being an immigrant is making a deliberate choice to go somewhere else, and my choice to come live here was not I mean, obviously I came here and I made the decision to come here, but it was not a thoughtful process of sorts. I came here because I met someone, I fell in love, and he came to Morocco, and we did a dance for couple of years, and then I came here. But so this is another opportunity for me to kind of reflect on what it means to be an immigrant. And I think it is a complicated, uh, space and place to be an immigrant in America, and I think anywhere in the world. Just being an immigrant, because it's an invitation to create a new home that might never really truly feel like home, and kind of problematizes this notion of home. What is home? And what do where I guess where what are the ingredients to create a home? Um, and with that, I have to confess that I never really thought of myself as an American. Not because I have anything against being an American, because I never had a strong sense of national identity. I'm originally from Morocco, for those of you who don't know. But even when I was in Morocco and lived in Morocco, I never really thought of myself as Moroccan. I was from Morocco, but not necessarily Moroccan per se. Obviously, I had a Moroccan passport and Moroccan national identity card and all of that refers to me as Moroccan in terms of my nationality, but it was never something. And it's just this idea of having national identity that is somewhat foreign to me. And part of that is perhaps because I have a very diverse background. Obviously, Morocco is in the African continent, so I am African. It's been colonized by the Arabs, so I have Arab heritage. It is the indigenous people of Morocco are the Amazigh, previously called the Berber people, but it's the Amazigh. So I am also from Amazigh descent. So it's African Arab. I am from a Muslim culture. I am not a Muslim, but I grew up in a Muslim culture. So I am influenced by that culture. I'm also very close to Europe, to Spain, Portugal, and France. And I visited a lot when I was living there. And I speak 4 languages. So all of these things, I always kind of thought of myself as more of and I lived in Tunisia. After high school, I actually went to study pharmacy in Tunisia. Go figure. I'm now professor of communication. But you know um, so I think perhaps part of that uh, idea of not being against being American, but kind of refusing to uh, have a national identity is perhaps because I was, in a way, always considered myself more cosmopolitan. And that was like putting limitations on who I am and my identity. But the other thing is also, so in Morocco, I was also an outsider. And I was an outsider in Morocco for 2 reasons. The first reason is because 100%, or I guess 99.99% of Moroccan population is supposed to be Muslim. So when you're born in Morocco, you are de facto Muslim. You don't have a choice. It is an identity, a religious identity that's given to you at birth. You don't have a say in it. You can change it. So you're doomed to be Muslim until the end. And if you choose not to be Muslim, you can go to jail basically. So, and in a way, I had to hide that identity, that I was not Muslim, that my family was not Muslim. Like right now, it's Ramadan, the fasting month, and typically, if you're not fasting, you cannot eat in the street. You have to do it in hiding, otherwise you'll go to jail. So that was all of my childhood, that I had to hide that I was not religious. So I was, from my friends, from my neighbors. So that was kind of part of being an outsider within my home. And the second part is that I come from a family of political dissidents. My dad spent 10 years in prison. My aunt died in prison. My uncle was in exile. My mom and I used to be followed by the police. Our phone was, constantly, we could hear noises in the phone. So growing up, I did not feel a sense of belonging because these people put my dad in jail. He was arrested when I was a 1 month old baby. And for the first 10 years of my life, I saw him behind bars. My aunt died in prison following a hunger strike when she was 25. So all of these things, I think, put this kind of barrier between me and, Morocco as a country. And perhaps that explains also kind of my refusal to identify with any particular nation. So coming to America in a way allowed me to really express my freedom. Not like Lyosha, I was not forced to leave Morocco per se, but clearly I was not able to fully express myself. And that's also one of the reasons why I chose the field of communication, because of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, because for me that is sacred, to have the ability to express who you are fully, and in Morocco, not just as an individual but also as a woman, the way I dress or the way I think, or drinking wine or all of those things, I did not feel fully free. So complicated, I know, but that's kind of so. Yes, America has granted me in a way the right to be fully myself, but on the other side of that is I'm still an outsider. I've been here for 21 or 22 years. I still, people tell me, oh, you look so exotic. It's like, as if that was a compliment, or, oh, your accent is so cute. And so those are reminders for me that I am still other, and that probably I will always be other, even to my colleagues, to my friends, to my students. I am always other, no matter how many years. Perhaps unlike Rochelle, I don't pass as an American. The minute you meet me, you hear me, I am different. And people are not immediately able to label me that I'm, Hispanic or Moroccan or Arab or Spanish or whatever. They're confused by my accent and my looks. So, and I like them to be confused. So, um, but that's kind of in a nutshell, my complicated relationship with what it means to be an American and what it means to be an immigrant. So I'll stop here to give others the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, who wants to go next?
I mean, I can go, I guess. Yeah. So, as I reflect on kind of my experiences as an immigrant, right? I do so. In my first of all, I apologize for the super formal introduction. I didn't know what I was writing. It came up like a professional resume for some reason, but I think in many ways, right, that's how I approach my story, right, is as a sociologist, right, with all this knowledge about the very real structural and cultural barriers that many immigrant groups face. And let's be clear, that doesn't resonate with my experiences, right? So for me, there's this kind of, dissonance that happens, right, where I am technically an immigrant, but I'm insulated, I'm privileged by virtue of some of my other status characteristics, where I don't get treated as like an immigrant in any stretch of the imagination. And so, when I think about, as a sociologist, right, I'm very interested in understanding the lived realities of marginalized groups, right? And minorities in the United States are, immigrants in many ways are, right? And we're part of those, that marginalized minority status in the United States, lacking the power, lacking opportunity structures, right? And so, and again, that doesn't jive with my experiences. And for a lot of important ways, but also I think in a kind of a broader sense that I'm insulated from this kind of anti-immigrant culture that we live in today. Of course, we've got this period of heightened persecution and crisis, with this anti-immigrant kind of sentiment that kind of rose to prominence over the last kind of last few election cycles, really. And you know, as a sociologist, right, I have to couch my experiences within that kind of culture. And so I think about, you know, the personal discourse, you know, the public discourse that exists out there surrounding immigration. And it's my job as a sociologist, right, to kind of myth bust to a certain extent, right, to bring objectivity to those public notions that, you know, immigrants are just coming to take your job, or, you know, coming to take advantage of all these wonderful services. Well, let's be clear, that's not a lived reality, right? And so, you know, in global comparisons, it's not that great, right? But there's that perception, right, that people are coming to take advantage, right? So you know, it's my job to kind of myth bust that a little bit. And the reality is that, you know, immigrants today are assimilating way faster than ever before, like statistically speaking, right? And of course, that is a reflection of kind of this globalization of our media and the role of technology, of course. You know, it's interesting for me as a sociologist. But also, I would suggest that it has a lot to do with a very strong anti-immigrant sentiment. Right? People don't have to do it for survival today, right? You know, as they face discrimination and prejudice, right, as a result. So for me, like, that's when I talk about the immigrant experience, right? I have to do it as a sociologist, right? And in many ways, I think it becomes a meaningful part of the conversation to a certain extent, because, as I noted, right, I am a privileged class of immigrant in many ways, right? Because I can't be singled out as an immigrant by virtue of my language, of, you know, my dress, my food, my religion, whatever, right? That I fit in. I'm Canadian, right? And who doesn't love Canadians, right? And you know, with for the some random you know, words that I say different, like when I say an eaves trough, people are like, what the hell are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, you know, the word the better thing, right? So there's moments where my outsider status becomes clear to everyone, but even then it becomes a joke. Right? Oh, that's such a weird word, you silly Canadians. It's like I don't fit in or don't understand American culture, right? It's never used as a tool against me, right? A reason to not hire me, or a reason to not include me in cultural celebrations, or whatever it might be, right? You know, when we think about assimilation in particular, right, as a barrier for immigrants in the United States, right, that it becomes kind of this cyclical thing, right, that by virtue of not fitting in or excluding people, right, it becomes this confirmation bias, right, that ultimately they can't fit in, right, and it uses evidence that, okay, right, it's this othering thing that drives me crazy. They're not interested in becoming American, right? And so, of course, in the reality, it doesn't match that at all, right? There's this very strong cause-effect relationship denied, you know, Black opportunities and ability to assimilate. Anyways, again, this is not my experience, right? So when I talk about the immigrant experience, I always have to, in fact, in my classes, I teach, right? I'm a sociologist, so I teach classes like minority groups and social inequality and about race and ethnicity, right? I teach about all these, you know, marginalized groups, and I out myself. I take it as an opportunity to out myself, right, to my students, and you know, it becomes this bigger part of this bigger conversation. And as a privileged class, I'm Canadian, right? So I'm not marked as different, as I noted, by virtue of my language or my norms or anything like that. But I'm not immediately identifiable. I have to out myself. In many ways, I pass as American. And people would never question my belonging anywhere, right, in any space. So I'm insulated from the kinds of discrimination, from the kinds of fear and prejudice that most immigrant groups face, particularly immigrants of color. And so, and even like, not even just like the social piece, like I'm privileged in terms of my pathway to come to the United States. I also came in 1999, by the way. So that was me too. My pathway was very easy. My whole family came together by virtue of a job transfer of my dad, and our visas were approved like right away. We instantly became permanent residents. We, you know, our path, you know, we kept getting encouraging notes, you know, about, oh, you know, you can become a citizen, you know, we can do dual now. Like they want us here, right? They were, you know, very quick to get us here. And let's be clear that the line is pretty long coming from other places, right? So my legal pathway here was way easier, right? So like even like the pathway for immigration, I've never met a rude person in in the department, right? They've all been very pleasant to me and always very welcoming to my family. Nobody's ever made me feel unwelcome, right? As I go into you know, into the immigration services office, right? In fact, just as an example, I often use this in my class as a kind of anecdote about the kind of interactions that I face as someone who passes as American. I once got pulled over. I'd like to go fast, right? So I got pulled over for like the millionth time. And I knew that my license was expired, right? I knew it, right? I had just come back from a trip. And when I had got on the plane, they're like, oh, by the way, your license is expiring next week. And I was like, I'm on for a month. So it is what it is. So I knew I knew it was expired. And so when I got pulled over, I was like, oh, okay, I'm getting a ticket. That's what it is. And the police officer came to my, first of all, I wasn't fearful for my life, right? I knew I was fine, right? That's already. He was like embarrassed when he came to my car and, told me that my license expired. You better go take care of that. And he said, I'm so sorry to even ask you this, but were you not born here? And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm Canadian. He's like, oh my gosh. He's like, yeah, I got like this notice on my when I ran your stuff. He's like, it was so weird. He's like, he's like, what's the way you like have a green card or something? And I'm like, oh, actually I do. And like, by the way, it's illegal for me not to carry my green card. Like it's a felony. I don't carry it because I've had my purse stolen a lot and it's a real pain in the butt to get it replaced. So I don't actually carry it with me. And so I was like, whoops, okay, that's going to be a problem. He's like, he didn't even ask for it. He was like, it was that funny. He's like, I wouldn't even stop. He's like, have a great day. Cool. And I compare the experience, right? Again, I'm a sociologist, right? I teach about these policies, right? And I had literally just taught the week before about the show me your papers law in Arizona. And I just thought, wow, was that ever just the perfect illustration of my privilege as a passing American immigrant? Because as you know, right, that's not the experience of most immigrants, right? I would in many places from many states. And if my skin color and my presentation wasn't so assimilated into the American model, I would have been locked up in jail, right? And potentially even charged with a felony. So that's kind of my story, I guess. I don't know, right? I don't know if you have questions, but I think that just perfectly illustrates how fortunate I am, but why I'm also an activist, right? Because I recognize that privilege and I recognize how unjust that system is that I benefit from. So hence my community activism, right? That I work really hard to make my experience, my immigrant experience, the experience for everybody. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I love the story. All righty. And last but not least, if you want to get started, please go right ahead.
All right. So it was funny to hear those stories because I do identify a little bit with some of the things that both of you lived through. I even consider myself I don't see myself as an immigrant. I see myself as a citizen of the world because I've been a citizen for, I don't know, almost 15 years now, that I don't think I belong to anywhere, but at the same time, I choose where to live. And so it's kind of a gypsy way to live, but it's for me has been a way to see the world and to experience other cultures, which is something that was always unrest for me when I was in Portugal, because I come from a small town and with gossips and the small-minded people. And that was something that I knew right away I needed to get out of there, right? So it was clear to me really early that I needed to get out and leave the world and see the world. So for me to live somewhere else was always the first thing on my mind, okay? I do familiarize with for example, the not carrying the green card. I don't carry wallets with me because I lost it so many times and I had to go through all the documentation in different countries, which can be a problem. So nowadays I don't carry any documents that I don't need, just a copy or just a driver's license, and that's it, something that I can get right away. And so now I've been immigrant all my life, basically, from what I remember. So it's hard to think of what's the difference from here in the US and in other countries. Um, it was good that I got this opportunity to reflect on the question and think about what does it mean to be an immigrant here, specifically in the US. And to be honest, I don't see any difference from any other places that I lived. You have the same obstacles, you have the same different advantages, but you have advantages as well. The obstacles are all related in the sense of you have cultural obstacles, you have language obstacles, you have bureaucracy obstacles, you have the dealing with the people, with the persons on a day-to-day life. You have those obstacles. So, for example, here, one of the things that I find most difficult is the understanding the jokes, for example, because everything is related to America, to the US. So all about the sports, all about the personalities, the movies, the music. And if you lived in other countries where we had access to not only American, but from other countries, it's not that we don't have, we miss those, right? I don't know who they are. So when we're talking about something, sports or jokes with colleagues at Slippery Rock, I do miss a lot of things. So this is something that happens here and happens everywhere, I guess. I don't have the language problem here. I do speak well. I do understand most of it, depending on the accent, of course. But it's much easier than, for example, in Holland, where I didn't speak Dutch. They were also not native English speakers. Also, so that is better here. So I feel like because I'm fluent in English already for a long time. So and it's part of my work to communicate in English. So even in Brazil, where they speak Portuguese there, so it's my native language. I still used to write and talk in English even. So why I came here basically, let's say you can say it for the American dream, to find a job, opportunity that valued me more than the places where I've been. I can tell you that in Europe, the job market, at least in my field, is saturated with people with PhDs and beyond that. So it's difficult to get a rewarding job. Then, for example, so you have in my field, especially, you have to work for the government, and then to work for the government, you have to do these sort of exams where they test. It's not just about knowledge, it's mostly about your preparation for that exam. How well are you prepared for that exam? And in Brazil, I got the feeling of that was even harder. They didn't even test you. They even did you medical exams and those things that doesn't have much to do with the job itself, right? And coming to the job interview here in the US, that's a good thing because I felt valued in that sense, right? So the job interview was about my skills, was about my CV, and it made me feel that I could grow here. So in that sense, I think this is the American dream that I started living and that I came for, right? So that's why I came here, because to be honest, when I think back, never when I was in Portugal or in Spain or in Holland, I thought of coming and living in the US. That was always something. Why should we go there? Um, it's a land of very a lot of contrasts. You know, the feeling that I don't know. For example, you cannot I don't know. You cannot. So you cannot show your breasts in public, for example, like in Europe you can, but you show a lot of violence on TV, for example, for young kids. So it's a big contrast for me, right? So as a European, so that was never. And then we have always, obviously, the tourists in the American tourists in Europe, they're not that friendly. They go there, get drunk. They think they own the place. So in Europe we don't have a good impression about Americans. So that was never in my mind, actually. And it changed that. I changed that when I came here. I met people. Everyone is very friendly. I never have a day where a person doesn't ask me, how am I? How are you? So that is nice to have. It's different, but it's nice. And the opportunities at the university also, I feel like I've been privileged. A privileged immigrant, let's say it, because the university has taken care of and help us all the way through the process, and makes me feel welcome, and that I have a place to grow. So obviously I came at a different level, right, than I could be when I was a student. If I were a student, I would have different challenges, right? And now as a professor, maybe my life was made a little bit easier, right? So I guess that is a little bit of what I think of the US. You have a lot of contrasts. I learned to navigate through the difficulties, and when I move to another place, but that's just me. It's not that I lose my identity or anything, but I try to integrate as much as possible, because it's a way of if I decide to live here, so I need to start living full, right, to completion, and to see everything as with the goods and the bads, right? Otherwise you don't take all benefits, right? And for me, it has been a lot of improvement from where I was living in Brazil. And I'm glad that I came here just before the pandemic. So I moved to the US recently in 2019. So I just had one semester and then the pandemic. And so I'm happy that I'm here and not in Brazil during the pandemic, because because of the health situation there is horrible. So I guess my life improved a lot, because there I didn't have much perspectives for work and for quality of life than the one I feel here. So for now, that's the place where I want to be, and I feel welcomed, and I like it so far. So I'm a privileged immigrant. I confess. All right.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you all for sharing your experiences. I greatly appreciate that. Anyone have any questions for the panelists while they're here?
Yes.
Feel free to either speak out, drop it in the chat.
Whatever. Yeah, I want to just thank you, and I feel so much, because it's so like intertwined, at the same time it's so different, right? So because we are imagining that the immigrant is a kind of melting pot of the experiences, but I can relate to each of you. Father, for example, I don't feel myself in Russia. I'm not Russian. That's why I never felt at home. I was always outsider, because my grandparents were German, exiled by Stalin and repressed by Stalin. I also feel that I'm privileged immigrant because I'm a white immigrant, right? Even I'm a queer immigrant, but I'm still a white immigrant. And being a white immigrant in the United States is completely different being an immigrant, Muslim immigrant from Chechnya Republic of Russia, for example, right? Also, for me personally, because I have like other journey, I don't have a country, as I said, and we call ourselves stateless, because when you cannot come back to your country, you already lost that motherland, and you're still not institutionalized here, and it's just like very weird. And that's cosmopolitan kicks in. You're a citizen of the world, and I'm a citizen of the world, and maybe when I'm retired, I want to move to Portugal or Lisbon or Switzerland. Switzerland is very expensive. I'm not going to be there, but and also emotional ties. That's you say integration. That's what we try to do. But I cannot be fully integrated because I don't get. And I learned English actually by Lucy Show, some YouTubers, because I knew English, but academic British English, not American, because American language is weird at first. But I grown to love American version of English more than British English. So, but at the same time, Andrea, I agree, I could not understand American jokes. I do not know the half of the celebrities when they talk, and I'm like, and I'm trying to get away, but at the same time, I have always been asked, oh, you're Russians in the Cold War, spies, all of that here exists. And when I came to Slippery Rock 2 years ago in 2018, when you moved to the United States, I moved from New York here. And that was the first, they were all fascinated, Russians, and I feel that we are contributing a lot. So we're bringing as immigrants a lot of cultural exchange, because I guess we can offer to the United States more than the United States understands at some point, right? And that's why I appreciate, and actually I understand, I do not mess up a lot with Russians, because I hate Russians, honestly. Because I know Russians, I hate Russians, but in the loving way. So, and that's why I grew up here as an immigrant with a lot of people from different countries at ESL classes. And that's what, brings me to the conclusion that regardless our way of destination, point of entrance, we all human beings. And that's what I guess we're lacking here. And that's why we're doing this, to bring more attention. We are so alike as we're different, right? So, and I really appreciate, because it melts my heart to be not an only immigrant on campus. Any questions, as Kendra proposes, or comments from all of you?
I love that you said you're a citizen of the world. Do you or any of the other panelists feel that the world should be more open and accepting in terms of allowing everyone to live or travel anywhere they would want? Anyone can answer this question as well, guys.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I mean, that is the dream. It's never going to happen, probably, John Lennon had that dream as well, but it didn't come true. Sure, I mean, but borders are not going to go away anytime soon. If anything, there's more and more borders and more obstacles to travel and go visit places. But as an American, you have more options in terms of visiting the world. Other places you have to have a visa to go here and there. So I think the having American citizenship allows you to move more freely, but that's not the case for most people in the world, for sure.
Well, and I would say too that part of like the anti-immigrant culture in the United States prevents that to a certain extent, right? That for example, right? We've all heard part of the discourse surrounding immigrants and the notion of being illegal, right? And questioning someone's legal status, and so I think about like that dehumanization of immigrants as a category of people, right? Not just those who aren't here with papers or documentation or whatever, right? But everyone who speaks with an accent or looks different, right, becomes dehumanized. And so I think there's a real barrier to that kind of full inclusion in American society in that context, right? And I think too, Andre, you mentioned it too, that when people travel abroad, right, as Americans, right, Americans aren't seen favorably, right, except for their money, right? So they, so people tolerate Americans because they spend a lot of money places, right? And so I still travel with my Canadian passport, and I have never had any problems, right? Um, and I think that's, and that's a really important thing. Like when I was traveling as an undergrad even, people were like, oh, good, yeah, you go first because you're the Canadian, right? And like, kind of grease the wheels because everyone hates us, right? And so I think that it's not just anti-immigrant here, it's anti-American other places, right? And so I think about kind of this immigrant phenomena and kind of this, public discourse and attitudes around immigration as kind of a real barrier. So that, beyond the very real, policy struggles, as Ottawa, noted, right? But I think also just at a cultural level, there's a barrier to that.
Yeah, I could add also that I think the word immigrant is already a barrier to accepting everyone in their own country, right? So if you classify yourself as an immigrant, you're already setting yourself like an outsider, right? I always try, if people, oh, you aren't from here? No, I'm Portuguese. Oh, how exotic. But that only makes me it's not something that I feel ashamed or that makes me feel outside, but it's something that it's part of who I am, and that's it. And now I'm here, and I'm here because I like it. Right?
That's a good point, because every single time I hate that in New York, everybody asks, move a little bit outside New York. Where are you from? Like, I'm from Brooklyn. From Brooklyn? Where? Brooklyn. And they already, by accent, they try to, and I also will tell you, Andrea, that not only Americans, most despicable tourists in Europe, it's Russians. So every time you go, who drinks more? Russian people. That's why Russians are not welcome to the Western Europe. When they go to now they discovered the Spain, and they go to Spain and they miss up, because Russians think if they go somewhere, everybody owes them. Everybody has to serve them because they spend money. Americans in Russia, for example, we love and hate. Why? Because they bring money. So they will welcome you, they will put you at the table, feed you, but behind your back, they will, oh, those Americans. But still, we have that pity to Americans because our culture in the 90s portrayed all Americans as white, rich, who come and maybe somebody take me as a husband and wife. That was a preconception, but here in the States, it depends when you move in. I was not asked once, surprising in Slippery Rock, where I'm from, because maybe people here more afraid to touch that nerve. But in New York, everybody's curious. Everybody wants to know where you're from. Like, that's why it's hard. Yeah, that's the word immigrant is definitely a stigma and label, and especially in certain areas, if we move to, I don't know, Texas or North Dakota, South Dakota,
And it's so variable, because if I'm in Holland, they think I'm Moroccan or Greek. If I'm in Spain, they think I'm Italian or Portuguese. And if I'm in Brazil, they would say something else. And here they don't know where I'm from. So it's not the looks or that makes me. It's just another feature of me, right? So labeling as an immigrant it's doesn't mean anything for me.
Well, it's kind of funny, Andre, because in Portugal, they think I'm Portuguese.
That happens,
You
in
could pass
Spain,
by.
they thought I'm Spanish, even though I knew a couple of words in Spanish, but it's very interesting. Yeah.
And kind of to just add something to what Rochelle said, in my classes, it's kind of interesting when we talk about immigration. I teach intercultural communication. And when we talk about refugees and immigrants, a lot of students say, well, if we open borders, everyone will want to come to America. It's like there's this kind of, idea that everyone just dreams of coming here. The whole world is going to rush into America if we open the borders. And I try to explain, especially for refugees, they're not here by choice. They're forced to leave. They have their home, their job, their family. They leave all of that. And it's hard for people to do that. So it's like there's this idea, it's like open America, everyone is gonna, the rest of the world will empty. So it's kind of interesting.
I guess because the notion that America has been projecting for the last, especially after World War II, that it's the best place and the country of the world, everybody wants to definitely come here. And that's while we still have so many issues within the United States, the notion of democracy was so proselytized and propagated, outside the world, when inside they have not known how to handle that. That's why I guess not every single nation, but especially Western countries, they definitely believe that people just want to move here because it's such an amazing country. And it's a great country in many respects, of course, but still we have to be critical. And that's why I guess for me, the revelation was to see more divisions. And after 7 years, without even joking, I will tell you, I find more similarities with the Russian mentality in the United States than any other country, because how propaganda works in a lot of states. So, and I will not believe that with Trump elected, I will see the Russian kind of flavor into the politics. And that scared me, because like I moved from one place and I see that it's unfolding here. And that's sometimes it's creepy, because you cannot go anywhere anymore. So what to do? What country to go?
Mm-hmm. Well, Lauren, I saw in the chat too that you had a question about like what we can do here in Slippery Rock, and there's like a lot of initiatives, right, that are going on campus right now. I know, some of the faces on the screen are part of that initiative, right, to try and build a more inclusive kind of culture on this campus, right? But I mean, there's very, very easy structural shifts too that haven't happened, right? Like I think about the food that's served and the holidays that are like acknowledged by the university, and like very simple things like that. Very simple in my mind, right? That's just boom, fix it. But but I think too, like a lot of the programming, for example, right? There's a lot of self-selection bias into it, right? And people seem to, and this is this immigrant groups, right? But on the basis of race and ethnicity, more generally, right? People their tribe on campus because there's kind of a sense of safety and familiarity. But again, that's part of the culture, right? That hasn't kind of fostered those kinds of that kind of immersive and inclusive kind of environment, right? And so yeah, so that's like the harder fix, I think, right? So we can make surface level changes, like make the food better, like more culturally sensitive, and fix our calendar, which is a problem. But also doing the hard work, right?